Hello and welcome to another video on the React Native intro, a course taught by Kadi, Kraman. She is the instructor, and he have a several course. One of them is from FrontendMasters, which is something that I'm currently looking at. So in today's video, I'm going to focus this on the React Native tool. Okay. And a little bit of and a brief overview of what is React Native and how React Native can help us here to build React Native applications that are now capable to output Android and iOS apps by maintaining its one code base, one workflow, one dev team, and also the ability to easily extend your app. So that's the whole goal of this React Native course. So a little bit of the structure. Kadi, she is a software engineer that have a background in mathematics, and then she moved on to the React, sorry, to the software development, and she worked at Formidable, a creative agency, as director of engineering mobile services, and now she is currently working as software developer at Expo, something that we're going to take a look later and is relevant to React Native. So as you can see here, this course was published 4 years ago. It's still relevant. Pretty much something hasn't changed that much. And this course is for JavaScript developers who wants to know about React, which they are new to React, but they know React because a lot of the techniques and strategy from React are transferable to React Native. A little bit of introduction to see, hey, it's a way to start developing this kind of application. You must have a computer, whether it's a Mac, Windows, or Linux, and a mobile device, Android or iOS, or any platform that allows you to emulate them. So what's React? Here, I love the way she started this course because she gave a little bit of context of how do we get here, and that is the mobile devices that we have right now, okay, has tremendous amount of processing power. I know that you might have heard this analogy that uh, right now mobile phones have over 100,000 times more processing power back in 2020, a 1 million times more RAM than the guidance computer Apollo 11 that landed the first human on the moon. So this is pretty crazy, something that we have achieved in the past 50 years. And despite that having this small touch base and small screen, which isn't suboptimal for web application or for browsing the web, unlike desktop or laptop experience, the market share that now Android and Apple around the world is circa or something nearly to 99%, according to GS stat counter, according to this. Okay. um so GS dot stat count, which is global stat, very helpful for small business owners, or for small business owner who wants to grow their business. So for example, in my case, where we when we have now a little bit more of data, we can make better decisions. So by looking now the market share, and perhaps in countries like US or Europe, where 50%, 50, almost 50% of people actually use iPhone and Android, in places like Latin, China, India, or Africa, they might use is way much more Android devices. For example, in the case of India, or if you take a look at this in South America, I think perhaps, all right, 85% of devices are, or people use, so 85% of uh, mobile OS market share in South America is coming from Android. The 14 roughly 14% uh, or less than 50% is from iOS. So if you compare that, for example, in Europe, I think the market share of iOS is a little bit bigger, 32%, in contrast with Android with 67%. And in the case of where is Oceania, right? I think it's actually, as you can see here, iOS lead the way with 54%. So now, if we take a look at Africa, for example, 85% of people down there actually live in that. Um, yep, use Android. Uh, in South America, I already saw that it's 85%. So they're actually quite equivalent in that. Uh, and in the United States, actually, is that market share in iOS is 59%. Okay, so once you are now able to see this market share, in we take a look at a couple example of OS. For example, in desktop or laptop, what you have is um, Linux, Mac OS, or Windows, and their particular devices where they run on this when they run this OS, like Lenovo, Dell, of MacBook, is similar to the mobile world where we have OS like the iOS, Android, where it runs on iPhone, in the case of iOS, or Google, Samsung, and Nexus with Android. So this is statistic, I think this is worldwide. Yep, this is a statistic from, yeah, worldwide. Exactly. This is a worldwide statistic here, as you can see. So because these particular applications only run on their OS, okay, so you can work, you can, so one app from iOS won't work on Android. You can think of this like if you're trying to build a house with people that talk in Spanish or Hindi or Chinese, French, German, it will be quite hard. However, unlike us, or unlike that example, we can find ways to communicate each other. Unfortunately, because how this thing was designed, they are not capable of learning that. Okay, so one application runs on a particular OS, and it cannot run in another OS. So there is no portability here. So if you're running applications on Android, you must have, or you must have to write those applications on Kotlin or Java or Kotlin. And in the case of iOS, you have to do that on Object-C or Swift. Okay? All right. So what happened here is that we have two development workflows, and it can become quite slow, tedious, hard to keep track of what's going on and where or tracking features of different code sets. So those problems that other people's or the companies like Facebook had, so then they decide to have a go at it. Okay? And they decide to have a go at solving it. And this is where React Native comes into play. One code base, one workflow, one language capable of uh, fully extend the functionality of this. And this is where the value of React Native comes from. So despite being powerful, and yep, I also quite biased with that by what she describes. So, for example, what Kadi Kraman described. I also have experience working with other tool sets, whether it's Ionic, Cordova, you name it, when they use WebView, a particular way of building applications. Uh, if you want to do something outside of that, you are on your own. Whereas here, you can have in React Native fairly straightforward way of how you can access to native directive, native instructions, if you need to. So that was quite interesting because that also lead us to uh, recognize the benefits of that, which is it allows you to build applications on Android and iOS, which are indistinguishable from real native apps. Is fully extensible, which is one of the great things of that, and it is also open source. So now that we know what React Native is, and there is a little bit of story as a way to understand where all of this come from, and when you need to mention that, you say, "Hey, this is my source from Kadi Kraman, Kadi." Like a Kit Kat, Caddy. Okay, Kadi, Caddy, exactly, Caddy. Uh, so we look at how this works. Okay, so how React Native works behind the scenes. So pretty much this work uh, by instead of having to for example, in other tools like Ionic, Cordova, and Capacitor, where they run is a web view from that. React Native is built in such a way that targets existing compilers. What does it mean by that is that because now through all of these different pieces or through all of these different actors involved in the process, from writing to creating an application, okay, eh, where you have now the platform, a translator, a compiler, and a language, okay, because now you have all of these uh, different pipelines, okay. So React Native is built in a way that it targets the existing compiler. It targets each one of them, each one of those workflow or each one of those compilers. Why this is important? Because instead of having to create is a compiler or a engine, JavaScript engine that output an Android artifact or an iOS artifact, which means an Android or iOS application. So they are reusing is the existing infrastructure. Okay, so for example, the compiler, which has been built to do one thing and one thing great, which is creating applications on their particular platforms, whether it's to you can imagine this as someone that is very, very good at using all of the space available in your house. Sounds like your grandma, mostly, most of the time, or grand aunt, someone in the family. Okay, uh, most of the time, all know how to use this every space available in the most efficient way as much as possible. Okay, uh, or at least as is in my case with my family. So that's what happened. So React Native, instead of creating its own particularly compiler, that takes JavaScript as an input and output each one of these particularly applications, Android, iOS, Windows, blah blah blah. It say, hey, now that I get this JavaScript code, I'm gonna take this JavaScript code and I'm gonna target each one of those compilers per platform. So you have a standard Android compiler where it generates the Android application, a standard iOS compiler that it also generates the iOS artifact, the window, the React native VR. So this particular architecture of having this bridge, of having this adapter, presumably they following is this pattern called the adapter. Okay. Uh, yep. Presumably, presumably, is something that uh, it create this bridge between two applications that cannot communicate. So it creates this interface. Okay, it's an instructional design pattern that allow object with incompatible interface to collaborate. You know, so for example here, card to rail adapter. So is with different interface, two object with two different interface allowed to collaborate each other. So I'm assuming that they actually using this adapter, this structural pattern. Makes a lot of sense. You know, makes a lot of sense. So once you know this, once you get this from that, uh, it's pretty much like this is the overall overview of the Android or the React Native architecture. Okay, so they now target, so React Native target uh, existing compilers. Pretty much that. Okay. Okay. So what we're gonna see right now. Okay. Glad you ask. Glad you ask. Is uh, couple question. The QA, which is something that I think is quite important, most likely to learn from their pain points. Okay, from their own painful experience. One of them was, what are the problems that so what are the most common problems that she have faced, um, which she might end to reconsider to not use React Native. Uh, and she described two things: linking an application in Android to a specific mail provider, and the other is a payment provider unavailable in React Native. So, which means that If that is not supported, you will have by your own create those stuff for that. Uh, so with the advance of Devin or ChatGPT, now you can do that pretty much straightforward. However, you must know to learn is the fundamental of that language. Okay, what are the fundamentals? And it doesn't matter if you don't know everything of that. You can learn along the way as you go. That's one of the beautiful things of this. Okay, makes a lot of sense. Okay, makes a lot of sense. So. Now with that, okay. Um, duh, 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 duh. So that question is like, well, it is a quite hassle. Uh, it's a bit of a hassle. And when she mentioned a bit of a hassle, is that it is a hassle. However, uh, you might need to find yourself writing Objective C code or Kotlin as a way to get this specific functionality. And I think this is something that you might consider with the advancement here with ChatGPT and Devin. It'll make your life much more easy. Totally. So now you are capable of write this particular code, and as I mentioned, learn the fundamentals. So question one was, what are the so what has been your pain points when it comes to building this type of application? First is that you have to write your own React Native layers, whether it is for a payment processor or for email providers, okay, in their particular experience, mail providers and payment processors. So based on her experience, you might find yourself to handle that. Uh, so that's interesting. That's cool. And it can be quite a hassle as a way to prepare yourself when you need to do this kind of thing. But there is nothing to fear about it. You just know that this is something that you have to do. Now you have sidekicks that can help you with that. Awesome. But it's up to you now to learn how all of these different pieces work together and how they interact each other. Great. Cool. The other question was for like, do we have any performance penalty right now? Especially if you are building any React Native applications. So, is there any application or package that we must avoid to build? So, she mentioned that React Native, the people of React Native, has been built a JavaScript engine called Hermes, where it points to that it actually makes things much more performant. All right. So, with that, okay, now it is time to take a look at. It is now take a look at the Expos versus React Native. Okay, so Expo, la la la. So Expos versus React Native. I mean, it's this. Okay, Expo versus React Native. Okay. If you have been eyeing, if you have been eyeing of the React Native space lately,
Have you heard of Expo?
okay, exactly. You have probably probably heard about Expo. First time, I must say.
If you haven't, Expo is essentially a suite of tools built for and around React Native.
Okay. If you haven't, if you haven't, Expo is a suite of build. Mhm. Expo is a suite of build tools. That makes sense. Expo is a suite of build tools. Right now, what I'm doing is that because now I am immersed in what I'm consuming, it's like I understand all of this concept of how they relate each other. When she mentioned it's a suite of build tools, because right now what I'm doing is taking notes from their course. So I cannot show you that I'm watching that video. But when she mentioned this suite of build tools, in my case, it was like, okay, what are the build tools? Build tools for each one of those platforms. So it's communicating to, or it's targeting those uh, already existing compilers from the Android, from iOS, or from Windows, and for React VR. So that makes a lot of sense. So it's a suite of build tools.
Eyeing up the React Native space already.
Mhm.
Have you heard of Expo? If you haven't, Expo is essentially a suite of tools built for and around.
Exactly. It's a suite of build tools.
And
Exactly.
Expo is
It's a suite of tools.
essentially a suite of tools built for and around.
It's essentially a suite of tools built around. Okay. If you haven't, Expo is a suite of tools built.
If you've been eyeing up the React Native space already, you've probably heard of Expo. If you haven't, Expo is essentially a suite of tools built for and
It's a suite of tools built.
around React.
It's a suite of build tools. It's a suite of tools built for and around and around. It's a suite of tools built for and around of React Native.
Native.
A suite of tool build.
Suite of tools built for and
Exactly. A suite of tools built for and around of React Native. Okay. It's a suite of okay. A suite of tool builds and around of React Native. So you have React Native and have this suite of tools. So might be one of those tools might be is for helping to write your code, building, testing, deploying, and monitoring. Okay, okay. Is this suite of build? Is this suite of tool suite? Yeah. Is this suite of build? Is this suite of tools built around? Is this suite of tools built built for and around React Native? Okay.
around React Native. And it's designed to basically make your building app experience as easy as possible.
hmm And it is designed to make your building app experience easily as possible.
So it's all focused on developer experience.
Okay, as easily as possible. So, and it is designed to make your building app experience as easily as possible. But as she mentioned, it is focused on developer experience. So it is okay. So it is all focuses exactly. It is all focuses on developer experience.
They're a separate company and they're not affiliated with Facebook. Basically, make your building app
Hmm.
experience as easy as possible. So it's all focused on developer experience. They're a
Yeah, it is all focused on developer experience.
separate company and they're not affiliated.
Okay, they are separate companies and not affiliates with Facebook. Okay, they're not affiliated with Facebook.
With Facebook. Now, some people have really strong opinions about whether or not to use Expo, and
Okay, some people have strong opinion about whether or not to use Expo
or just use plain React Native.
or just to use just to use plain React Native.
So if you're one of those people, just feel free to skip this section and just carry on with your question.
So if you are one of those people, feel free to skip this and carry on. And carry on your preference.
This is an introductory workshop and can be followed with Expo and without.
Okay. This is an introductory workshop. Okay, this is an introductory workshop and can be follow and can be followed with Expo and without it. Okay.
However, if you have strong opinions, if you don't have any strong opinions and you need some help deciding, just read on. If you're new to mobile development and basically just want to have a taste of React Native and just play around with things a little bit, I would 100% recommend you go with Expo just because it's easier to get going than mobile development.
Exactly.
And basically just want to
Exactly. So you are new, if you're new to mobile development,
have a taste of React, have any strong opinions, and you need some help deciding, just read on. If you're new to mobile development and basically just want to
if you're new to mobile development, and basically just
have a taste of React Native and
exactly, if you're new to mobile development and want to have a taste with mobile with React Native
just play around with things a little bit,
and play around with this thing a little bit.
I would 100% recommend you go with Expo just
Exactly. I will 100% recommend it to go with Expo.
because it's easier to get going. There's a lot less upfront configuration.
Okay. Go with Expo because it is easier to go with them. Is a lot of less configuration.
And you just get to writing code much quicker.
and you just need to write, and you just can, yeah, and you just get to write code more quickly. Hmm.
You should also definitely go with Expo if you're on Windows or Linux.
Exactly. If you are if you are on Windows or Linux, you should definitely, I don't have any option. You should definitely, definitely go with Expo.
You want to use your physical iPhone to run the app on, because you can't build an iPhone app on Windows and Linux. You need a Mac for that. With Expo, if you're on Windows or Linux, you want to use your physical.
Exactly. If you're on Windows or Linux, you should definitely go with Expo. But you want to use your physical your physical iPhone to run your app.
Your iPhone to run the app on, because you can't.
You to run your app on, because you can build an iPhone app on Windows or Linux. You need a Mac for that. Because you can build an app on because you can build an app on Windows or Linux. Exactly. Because you can't because you can build an app on Windows or Linux, because you can build an iOS an iOS app on Windows or Linux. Yeah, you you'll need a Mac for that.
Can't build an iPhone app on Windows and Linux. You need a Mac for that. The main reason I'm recommending Expo for an introductory workshop is because it may take quite a bit of time to set up your development environment for the first time without Expo. So I've added some like just guidelines, not guidelines, like from my experience, how long it could take. So it depends on your environment and whether you want to use your physical device or if you want to use an emulator or simulator. The Expo on a physical device is the quickest possible way to get going.
Okay. Okay. Expo on a physical device. Okay. Expo on a physical device is the quickest. Yeah, Expo on a physical device is the quickest possible way to get going. Hmm. Expo on a physical device is the quickest way to
If you
get
already have
going.
Node installed, for example, you'll pretty much get going in a couple of minutes for both Android and iOS. If you want to use a iOS simulator or an Android emulator, you'll have to install Xcode or Android Studio, which can take quite a bit of time. Hence your added time.
Hmm. Playing React Native on physical devices, 2.5 hours Android only.
And if you want to do plain React Native on a physical device or a simulator or an emulator, there's a little bit more extra time to get everything to play nice in your computer. And on Windows or Linux, it generally can take a little bit longer, and you can't build any iOS applications because you need a Mac device for that. On Windows or Linux or an emulator, there's a little bit more extra time to get everything to play nice in your computer. And on Windows or Linux, it generally can take a little bit longer, and you can't build any iOS applications because you need a Mac device for that. This is why most React Native developers actually end up on a Mac, because you can build an Android app on a Mac and an iOS app, but you can't do the same on any other device. Now, Expo has some restrictions, and the main restriction is basically that if you need to add any native code, so what we discussed earlier about if you find any things that you want to do that React Native doesn't let you do, or that are not built into Expo, you won't be able to do it without what we call ejecting, and this basically means you can a Mac and an iOS app, but you can't do the same on any other device. Now, Expo has some restrictions, and the main restriction is basically that if you need to add any native code, so what we discussed earlier about if you find any things that you want to do that React Native doesn't let you do, or that are not built into Expo, you won't be able to do it without what we call ejecting, and this basically means converting your Expo application into a vanilla React Native application. So that's the only time where it becomes tricky. So in my experience working with React Native, all production apps that I've built have been either ejected if they started with Expo or just started with plain React Native. And this is mostly the clients, like what the clients have wanted, or just what we've had to do due to the features that we had to add. I always use Expo for in-person workshops though, because otherwise we'd all spend 2 hours getting set up, and that's not very fun.
Holy moly. Holy moly. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god.
App, but you can't do the same on any other device. This is why most
Okay. Oh my god.
longer get everything to play nice in your computer.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
So Xcode or Android 4 minutes. The X should take. So it depends on your environment and whether you want to use your physical device or if you want to use an emulator or simulator. The Expo on a physical device is the quickest possible way to get going. If you already have Node installed, for example, you'll pretty much get going in a couple of minutes for both Android and iOS. If you want to use
It can take it can take quite a bit of time to set up your developing environment without Expo, since you will have to download, install, and configure Xcode and on Android Studio. Just to give you an idea to the setup time, here are some really rough estimate based on my experience. Expo on physical device, 10 minutes, Android or iOS. Expo on iOS simulator, 1 hour. But this is for setup, everything. Okay. Expo on Android emulator, 1.5 hours. Plain React Native on physical device, 2 hours. Android or iOS. Plain Native on iOS simulator. Plain React Native on Android or iOS simulator and Android emulator. Oh my god. Okay. And on Windows, Expo on physical devices, Expo on Android emulator, roughly 2 hours. Plain React Native on physical device, Android only 2.5 hours. Okay. Holy moly. So it's pretty much a mandatory. Hmm. Okay. Okay. I see that. Okay. I see that. Hmm.
A iOS simulator or an Android emulator, you'll have to install Xcode or Android Studio, which can take quite a bit of time, hence your added time. And if you want to do plain React Native on a physical device or a simulator or an emulator, there's a little bit more extra time to get everything to play nice in your computer. And on Windows or Linux, it generally can take a little bit longer, and you can't build any iOS applications because you need a Mac device for that. This is why most React Native developers actually end up on a Mac, because you can build an Android app on a Mac and an iOS app, but you can't do the same on any other device.
So this actually means that I need to buy a Mac. Oh, okay, 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 okay. I wasn't expect that. Okay. Hmm. Okay. I'm assuming. I'm assuming all. Hmm.
You can can't build.
It is. It is safe to run at least for. Hmm. It is safe to run at least for this week Expo. Okay, it is safe to develop on Expo. It is safe to develop SSD mobile app on Expo on Windows. At least, at least, at least, at least, at least until I can get my hands on a Mac. Hmm. Okay.
Build any iOS applications because you need a Mac device for that. This is why most React Native developers actually end up on a Mac because you can build an Android app on a Mac and an iOS app, but you can't do the same on any other device. Now, Expo has some restrictions, and the main restriction is basically that if you need to add any native code, so what we discussed earlier about if you find any things that you want to do that React Native doesn't let you do, or that are not built into Expo, you won't be able to do it without what we call ejecting. And this basically means converting your Expo application into a vanilla React Native application. So that's the only time where it becomes tricky. So in my experience working with React Native, all production apps that I've built have been either ejected if they started with Expo or just started with plain React Native. And this is mostly the clients, like what the clients have wanted, or just what we've had to do due to the features that we had to add. I always use Expo for in-person workshops though, because otherwise we'd all spend 2 hours getting set up, and that's not very fun. Now, if you've been eyeing up the React Native, now if any things that you want to do that React Native doesn't let you do, or that are not built into Expo, you won't be able to do it with won't be the same on any other device. Now, Expo has some restrictions, and the developers actually end up on a Mac.
So yeah, it's like I will have to I will have to end up yeah, I will have to end up I will have to end up or developers developers or React Native developers will end up mhm, React Native developers will end up having to buy a Mac since they can build apps since they can build apps uh, since they can build iPhone or iOS since they since they can since they can build apps in Mac Yeah, since I can build apps for Android and Mac, something that with platforms like Windows or Linux, you only can create Android. hmm So that's why a lot of the React developers actually end up on a Mac. React Native developers will end up having on a Mac, on a Mac, having yeah, React developers will end up having will end up will end up on a Mac. Since they can build apps from Android and Macs or something like that. And it also is so using Expo allow you to read those exactly. And using Expo allow you to read those. Yeah, using Expo allow you to read those. The setup time vastly. Allow you to reduce the setup time.
Because you can build an Android app on a Mac and an iOS app, but you can't do the same on any other device. Now, Expo has some restrictions, and the main restriction is basically that if you need to add any native code, so what we discussed earlier,
hmm So Expo has some limitations if you need to add some exact. Expo has some limitation if you need to add. All right. Expo has some limitations if you need to add some native code to your app.
about if you find any things that you want to do that React Native doesn't let you do.
Okay. For example, if I think this is very 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 important, man. Limitations. Expo limitations. Expo versus React and Expo limitations. Expo has some limitations if you need to add some native code to your app. For example, if you are implementing something that React Native doesn't, okay, doesn't let you do,
Or that are not built into Expo,
or are not built in for Expo,
you won't be able to do it without what we call ejecting.
you won't be able to do it without something called ejecting. Oh my god.
And this basically means converting your Expo application into a vanilla React Native app.
And that is to convert your React
Expo. You won't be able to do it without what we call ejecting. And this basically means converting your Expo application into a vanilla React Native.
okay, and that is converting your Expo Expo application into vanilla React Native app. Oh my god. Oh my god.
So that's the only time where it becomes tricky.
That's when it becomes tricky.
So in my experience working with React Native, all production apps that I've built have been either ejected if they started with Expo.
Okay. So from interesting. From your experience, from Kadi Kraman experience, from Kadi Kraman experience, all apps have an
Or just started with plain React Native. And this is all production apps that are
from Kadi Kraman experience, all production apps that she had that she had built have been either ejecting, because when you're now working with clients like that,
built have been either ejected if they started with Expo or just started with plain React Native.
has been either ejected if they have been started with Expo or just started with plain React Native.
And this is
hmm And this is based on clients' needs.
mostly the clients, like what the clients have wanted, or just what we've had to do due to the features that we had to add. I always use Expo for in-person workshops though, because
hmm
otherwise we'd all spend 2 hours getting set up, and that's not very fun.
Okay. So she used Expo for speed up the setup process because it can take up to 2 hours to do that. And it's not very fun. So, Expo limitation here. Holy moly. Expo versus React Native. Okay. Um, okay. Expo versus React Native. Getting started with plain React Native and adding linter and debugging. Okay, and then you have the navigation. And then you have the hooks. And you have the form. Okay. Holy moly. Holy moly. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all what I'm gonna say. It has been quite interesting today's video. Totally. So that'll be all for the video. Take care. Bye bye.